Darren Bonnell.
Daniel Urquhart, good to see you.
20 years in the making, mate. Here we are.
Yeah.
I've been looking forward to this, actually, mate. You've got a very interesting past, and you've got an amazing future ahead of you, but also what you're currently involved in. So let's give it a snapshot. So you're a Campbelltown kid, single parent home, grew up in the Commission area of Sydney, a roughhead footballer. You and did your brothers play footy?
Definitely, my next brother played a lot of footy, and
Did he?
And then it drops off as they,
Yeah. Because you actually played. You played for, was it West Tigers?
Yeah, I grew up in that whole junior system.
Yeah, right.
That's right. Yeah.
And now, mate, you're in leadership. You're in church leadership, of course. But what I love about what you're doing now, mate, is you've got, you're the creator of the Jethro Project, and so. We're going to talk about that today. I want to really get into this, but before we do, I want to hear about this backstory, and so do our listeners, because you've got, I don't know, it's a pretty unique start to life, and when you've talked about it in the past, it's really, I reckon, marked what has become your future, and once we've dug around in that a little bit, I reckon it's going to be a big part of why leadership's so important for you now, mate. Yeah. It's being able to take a life that's probably underperforming or, not where they want to be, and giving them the tools to be able to be everything they can be. So, mate, this is going to be awesome. So tell us a bit about yourself, though. Yeah,
well, you kind of headlined it beautifully. I explain it this way. I would say that my brothers and I grew up in the worst streets of the worst suburbs, raised by the best mother.
Yeah, wow.
And if I stick with that too long, I'll get emotional, and so I won't. But that's our upbringing, and I mean that's all we knew, right? So we didn't know any different. So we just thought that was life.
Yeah.
If you lived in private sector housing and had a relatively new car, we thought you were pretty rich.
Yeah.
So that's kind of our story, and I'm extremely grateful for my upbringing. I'm extremely grateful. I think that it taught us to fight.
Yeah.
In a good way and the bad way,
unfortunately.
And the bad way. It taught us to fight. It taught us to have resilience.
Yeah.
And I think to this day we've seen so much happen, and not just me, my brothers as well.
Yeah.
So much happen in our lives, and I am able to sit here today and still remain extremely grateful because I have those roots.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? So tell us about Campbelltown, mate. Growing up, late 70s, early 80s.
Yeah.
I remember you telling me one story. You had like a riot sort of experience.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's funny. My wife, I was doing my story at an event, and I was preparing it, and I said to Bronnie, "It's so vanilla."
Yeah.
And Bronnie, my wife, says to me, "Read it. Read it to me what you put down." And she said, "That is vanilla. But Daz, your story is anything but vanilla."
Yeah.
And so it's funny what you just don't think about. I've been chased by a guy with an axe, through houses and down alleys and held at knife point. Literally on multiple occasions, my brother and I, where we would save someone from a gang a couple of times and ended up in the middle of a circle, two of us, like a scene out of a movie with a gang around us, and somehow surviving all of these moments. And so, a lot, we saw a lot of things that seemed normal, like here's a good example. I remember going to the presentation night for the Macquarie Fields Hawks. I only played there for 2 years, and my brother played there for a long time. And it was interesting because I was kind of the imported player as a 16-year-old kid, and we lost a few games back to back. And I remember to a 16-year-old kid, the locals are saying, "You're overrated, Bonnell, you're overrated." I'm like, I look back now and go, I was just a kid, the locals are booing me. And but I remember presentation night, and this probably captures it. I went to 2 presentation nights, and on one year, in the middle of the presentation night, some lady was presenting, and a person yells out from the crowd, I won't use the expletives, but Sonia, that's rubbish. And I'm telling you, like a scene out of an American movie, people start fighting, it turns into a brawl, people throwing chairs, and the presentation shuts down.
Yeah, wow.
The other year, I went to a presentation there. I get in the car, and we had a van at the time, and must have been staying at my dad's for the weekend. And my brother's in the back seat. He's had too much to drink. He's like 15. My dad's driving, and I'm in the middle of them, and they're trying to fight each other. And I've got these two people while we're driving. Like that's kind of my childhood. But again, I just come back and say, I had an incredible mother. Yeah. And so whilst that all sounds crazy, our home was incredibly stable and disciplined and, pretty, I would say she was pretty conservative in terms of what I was allowed to do and not to do.
Yeah, it's interesting, eh? Hey, so offline we were just talking about leadership. So, there's an age-old question, are leaders born or made? So given what you've just talked about now, and I know your background a little bit with footy and, turning up in different roles and, there you were front and centre and pretty much leading this and that. What's your take on that, Daz? Yeah. I've got some really strong thoughts around this because, see, that's not my background. My background's not that I was front and centre leading anything. I was always in the background and stuff. It's still my comfort zone, to be honest. But not you. You seemingly, wherever you stepped in, you were, come on, Daz, you're leading this thing. So what would you say about leadership? What you've been experienced as you're growing up? Yeah,
well, my experience is that leaders are maybe gifted. Yeah. But I would say that that's not the whole story. I raise leaders every day. It's the biggest part of what I do. And I would say that many leaders, many really great leaders are developed there. And I'll explain it this way and I'll tell you my story. So the backstory, my wife, for example, is this fantastic Bible teacher. Yeah. Right, Bronwyn Hilary Bonnell. So she just did something for the YouVersion Bible app. Yeah. And I think it's got, last I checked, and this is a month ago, had 3 million views globally, right? Wow. And then there's something else that's flowed out of that. My wife is what I would say, she's like what I would call a gifted Bible teacher. Yeah. So I'm not trying to give people a Bible lesson, but I would say I'm not a gifted Bible teacher, even though I've led churches forever. But the Bible requires that I'm able to teach. Yeah. And they're both valid. So my wife is gifted and needs to develop that. I would say I'm not gifted, but I need to be able. It's a prerequisite. And so I develop that ability. And I would say leadership's the same. There's those who are clearly gifted. Yeah. It's in them and they need to develop. And then those who they can develop the ability. And both are valid, both are essential if we're going to get everything done we're called to. Personally, my story is that I was doing this thing called Kazone, with the course put together by a guy called Craig Rochelle. And we're doing the course, I was about 40 years old. Yeah. And basically it's the only time I've ever done a temperament thing or a personality thing where it took you back. And it took you back to your childhood, and it asked you like for key moments and what you did, what you did, all of that kind of thing. And what I realised as I filled this in is that I ended up being the leader of everything, from primary school right through to being an adult. And what's interesting about that is in primary school in particular, and maybe in high school, the person who ends up captain is usually the best player. Now, in a couple of cases I was, but in a bunch of the cases, I was not. So that was unusual. And so I looked at that and went, I've ended up the leader my whole life. No one taught me how to lead. And I think really in the infancy of leadership, all I did was got out in front, led and modelled something. Yeah. I don't know that anyone even taught me that. That's just what I thought, if I'm the leader, I need to lead, I need to be at the front in critical moments, and I need to model something that everyone else can follow. And honestly, that's where it started, and that's how I realised at 40 years of age, having led pretty well my whole life, the light bulb finally went on. Yeah.
Well, this is why it's interesting, mate, because getting back to the original thought, like that's not my background. Yeah. Right. And so, mate, I played sport, footy my whole life, and was never the captain, not once. And mate, if anybody want to try to make me a captain of anything at school, it's like, see you later, bro. I don't want to be here, never lead anything here. But here's the thing. So I get into business, into GJ's. What was I, 33 at the time. And what I didn't realise is that here I was stepping into a building business that I could do because I'd been doing it my whole life up until that point. What I didn't realise is that it was actually a leadership business. Yeah. I was actually I was going to have to create teams and work through teams of people. And it wasn't that I couldn't lead, it's that I'd never considered it. Like, everyone knows what leadership is. You all got those mates who always end up telling you where we're going and what we're doing and, where we are. But I'd never really considered leadership like that before, because this is the thought, whether or not you're good at leadership or not, there's certain positions that you step into, you are the leader.
You're the leader, yeah.
And I didn't realise that at the time. Yeah. And I'll tell you what, Daz, it had a massive impact on my business. And so we talk about it here, and you and I talk about this a lot, but we talk about it here like hand, head and heart. And so I got into a business that required hand, head and heart, and I only had hand, which is skill set.
Yeah, right.
So for those who are listening, hand, head, heart is skill set, mindset and character, right? And so I had the skill set because I was a builder and I'd done it before, and I thought, wow, that's good. I'm going to move the needle through working hard and just developing skill set, not realising that I actually now had to lead people, had to get people up for game day. And so what seemingly comes easy to blokes like yourself didn't come easy for me, and mate, it cost me. For 5 years, 5 years in, I was looking to get out. It was like, this is no good. This is bloody horrible. So it's interesting. Yeah. So tell us your leadership journey, mate, as far as heading up church and everything you've led beyond that as an adult.
Well, you're in charge here, so I'll do whatever you tell me, right? But what would this would be a learning moment for me, because I develop leaders. This is my life, as you know. So I'm curious, as in, to me it looks like you're a gifted leader as long as I've known you. But let's assume that you're the able leader, or the one who became able. What can you give me some insights? Like what would have been helpful to you if someone was working with you in the early days of that, and what were the key things that changed things for you? Because anyone who knows you knows the quality leader you are. Like, and there's no one that would look on today and say, "Oh, what's Dan doing leading?" So, there's some critical pieces there. I'm curious because I've got to develop guys like you every day, and I'm like, oh, hang on, I might learn something here.
Well, I reckon that's why what we're doing is this is why this is such a really good conversation, because getting back to just quickly before I answer your question, what you do now in the Jethro Project is exactly that. It's helping leaders to raise leaders. And so when I first got into business, I feel like I expected people to know their job and to do their job. I didn't actually consider that I would have to lead them. So it's obvious to me now, but back then, if you think about the best of sports people, mate, Andrew Johns is always a really good example. Best footballer maybe's ever pulled the boots on, and yet he needed a coach. Yep. He needed someone leading him. So we talk about leadership like this now. And this is why I reckon it's so important for us, for anyone who's listening out there, no matter what it is that you lead, whether or not you're a natural leader or whether or not you're somebody who's had to grind it out and become one, if you're in a position of leadership, this is what we would say the foundations of leadership are. We need to be setting the expectation. We need to empower the outcome. We need to measure the result, and we need to hold people accountable. Yeah,
that's brilliant.
Now, I didn't do any of those. And so what I wasn't, Daz, is I wasn't deliberate. I wasn't a deliberate leader. I was a positional leader because I was the boss. It's not like I didn't know that, but I didn't know what leadership equaled. Yeah. And so I didn't have a formwork, I didn't have a framework, I didn't have a mindset. I didn't have a skill set on how to lead. So this is I reckon the big takeaway for just this little segment. It's that if you don't have a natural skill set, but the position's demanding that you lead, you can learn that.
Yes.
But for guys like you, who it comes natural to, I think you do that stuff naturally. I don't know. It'd be interesting to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, I would say I do some of that naturally. It's funny. I would call that like the outline of a playbook. I'm like, oh, that's a great playbook. Because you can, if you do those four things, the game change in that is ridiculous, right? Just as a leader. Yeah. So for me, my brain thinks in terms of, that's how it thinks in simple boxes. So I'm like, so I think I intuitively did it, but what I realized, you can lead some followers doing that, but you can't raise leaders doing that, because what's intuitive to you isn't going to come through for them. And so I remember one of the early times that I did this was, I'd always been the visionary. I'd provided here's a picture of the future, creating passion in the present. This is a holy discontent we've got to do something about. This is a mission conviction. This is what we're going to do about it. Here's a picture of the future we're going after. and here's the strategy, you know, how we get from here to there. Here's how we're going to get it done. And, you know, I'd put all that together. And then I realized as I tried to release that to people that were really good leaders, I'd say, I'm going to release some of the vision to you. And they would come up with a plan, but not what I would call vision.
Yeah.
And so I had to then take that and do what I just described. I'm going, okay, well, how do I do this? Oh, I create holy discontent.
Yeah.
What's that thing I've got to do something about? Mission conviction, what am I going to do about it? Vision clarity, it's like, if we turn up working and in my way of thinking, God turns up moving, what could happen here? And of course, with that, that's the picture of the future. What are the 3 or 4 things that move us there? And I create a framework for them to go on that journey and develop. And our goal is that a person who was maybe able to lead, not gifted to lead, would be able to cast vision for anything in 3 minutes. And what we say is, it's not about just crafting and casting, but how do you craft, cast, and catalyze vision, galvanize buy-in, and lead the vision seasons? And we call that a visioneer. And so we package all of that so that the leader who's developing can get it done. Does that make sense?
It does make sense. And it goes back to the original question that, you know, are leaders born or made? Because you see, that vision part was lacking in our business early days as well.
Yeah.
Because it's funny. It's funny with vision, mate, because you see, vision is a hope for the future. Mate, I was just hoping to get through the day.
Yes.
And this is the other thing with vision, I reckon, for my experience at least, is that you've got to actually hope for the future. And when you're just looking to get through the day, you actually don't.
So good. Yeah.
You don't want to get your hopes up because you're copping a flogging and you don't want to be disappointed anymore. And so that's why I think what you're saying is really important because, okay, you step into a leadership position. So let's just say you're the owner of the business, or you've been promoted from within and you're one of the high-level managers, whatever it might be. You have now entered a leadership position, whether you like it or not. And that position is going to ask you to do things that you have never done before. It's going to ask you to think about things that you've never had to think about and be responsible for things that you've never been responsible for. And at that time, we need to assume that they do not have the skill set to be able to do that. Because one of the things for me was around vision was, again, I didn't want to cast vision. I wanted to get through the day.
Yeah.
And I wanted to feel successful in what I was doing and not feel like I was constantly failing. Vision to me was a potential risk of failure. And so I would, like we all do at times, we just dull it down.
Yeah.
You know, here's the problem. I've stepped into a leadership position that demands me to have vision. And so when our business experience, mate, when we first got into our building business, I think we sold 40 homes, built 40 homes in the first year, and every year after that it was downhill. And the reason was because I didn't have a vision. Yeah. And so I'd set goals, but I'm not a goal-orientated person. They didn't drive me. They didn't get me out of bed. Money didn't get me out of bed. So I had no why. Yeah. I'd taken on a business thinking that it would be easier than it was, and I had no mechanism, no tools that you just mentioned, that helped me realise what the position demanded of me. Even if I'm not good at it, this is what the position will demand of you. Well, I didn't know that, and I didn't have the tools.
What ended up getting you out of bed in the end? What? Like, I know you weren't laying down in bed; you were getting up and going to work. But you know what I mean? Yeah. When did you hit on that? Because I feel like you are a driven human. So I'm trying to understand. Going, when was that shift?
Yeah. Well, what it was is it was 5 years in when we're looking to sell, and I'm like, I just can't do this anymore. You know, like I don't want to do this anymore. Would probably be better. And I feel like we're talking to a lot of people at the moment around, you know, whether it be business or whatever it is you're leading, because this is the thought, is that we went into this with high hopes. Nobody gets into things with thinking they're going to fail. Yeah. Nobody gets into marriages. Nobody gets into business. Nobody steps up as a sporting captain, or nobody does anything and plans to fail. But what we don't do is plan to succeed.
Yeah, that's good.
I hadn't planned to succeed, mate. I didn't have any of the metrics. I was just living on blind hope, if you will. And so I got to a point where I had to face myself and start to go, okay, well, because I was selling, I was out after 5 years. And then I was like, okay, what's it going to take to turn this thing around? I have to realise that I haven't even started the work of leadership. I haven't even even developed my team. I just threw, my supervisors, the poor buggers, I'd throw them a set of car keys and maybe drive them around for a day and show them the sights, and that'd be it. And so I had to start to face the man in the mirror and go, okay, well, what aren't you doing? And I hadn't even done anything, mate. I hadn't set the expectation. I hadn't empowered my team. I hadn't measured the results. So I was finding out everything the hard way. So everything, you're behind and under the pump. And then I wasn't holding my team accountable.
Yeah.
Not early. I was holding them accountable late after it was too late.
Yes, yeah.
But the thing is, Daz, I wasn't holding myself accountable either. So I had to... So the catalyst was I had to get a why. And we set a really strong mission statement.
Yeah, great.
And from that moment, everything shifted. Yeah. Because it became not what we did, but why we did it.
Yes, yeah. Yeah, it's almost a cliche now, right? But it's so true. It's so powerful. So I mean, I get out of bed for whys every day in my life, I think. So, yeah.
Because if you don't have one, it's hard to lead. Because if you don't have a why, your team doesn't have one either. Yeah. And it's funny because subconsciously you don't hold your team accountable because hey, I'm only just barely holding in there myself, But I can tell you when we did do that though, the whole thing shifted. And it wasn't just that, it was mission, vision, core values, setting really strong goals, set the expectation across every area of business, empower the people to actually carry it out, measure the results daily, weekly, monthly, so that you're not finding out the hard way when things are going south, and hold people accountable to the agreed standards and goals of the organisation. When you do those things in leadership, we'll talk about some team stuff in a second, but you've got at least the ingredients to be able to start to move the needle.
Yeah, yeah, that's brilliant. If it was a different podcast, I'd ask you to drill down on how many people are measuring, because I feel like I see people not measuring all the time. So, but we won't do that here. We'll get back on track wherever you're.
That's it. So, mate, let's talk about you, of course. Jethro Project, mate. This is fascinating. So, tell us what the Jethro Project is and how it gets leaders up.
Yeah, so we would say, you talk in terms of my discontent. I'll walk you through that. So this is what we work with. The Jethro Project basically develops leadership and leadership pipelines. And the pipelines I'd underline and then put in brackets ecosystems. Yep. And then we help build capacity. We would say we want to build expansion-ready capacity, whatever that looks like. And so they're the two things we're really, really focused on. And so we put it like this. In terms of holy discontent, the discontent for me was this. I would see leaders who were leading at a level and then they hit what I would call a ceiling, or they get stuck in the not yet zone. Them as a leader and what they lead. And sometimes you look and go, yeah, that's probably where that ceiling is. But a lot of times I look and go, there's more in that leader and there's more in what they lead. How can I get to that? How can I help them with that? Because my entire life, probably intuitively, I would ask myself, what do I do? What do I need to be doing now that maybe no one can even see, that positions me for what's possible in 5 years? And I've kind of always thought, or for a long time at least, always thought like that. And then I think about that in terms of me as a leader, who I lead and what I lead. And so at the Jethro Project, it was great that we were doing it, but that's just a small world where I live. And so I started to think about, how do I help others unlock that? What do we do that's going to help them? And so the Jethro Project works with around 200 churches, or more than 200 churches as we speak, businesses, faith-based organisations. We work directly at an executive level with eight denominations as of this moment. That's not including the ones we consult to across the year. They're those things are ongoing relationships. And we do all that in consulting, workshops and coaching. And I suppose our attitude is we want to be high impact, low cost, global leading. And for us, that's what we're trying to do. We want to add value every day and become the partner you value. And so that's kind of the Jethro Project. We have a team of coaches. We run as lean as we can because of what our bottom lines are. And we're seeing incredible results. Here's one. Literally, this is one from last week. Sitting with a leader who 2 years ago had some leadership gaps in key locations, plus just organic leadership development, which is 95% of the people I work with
Yeah.
have organic leadership development, which isn't working.
Yeah.
Or it's not getting the results they'd hoped for when you think about the investment made. So gaps at a really key level, location level, plus no leadership pipeline. So I'm sitting with that guy last week. He's got location leaders everywhere. They're building culturally consistent, building capacity into them, and 40 leaders in his purpose-built leadership pipeline that we helped him develop in 2025. He's now got 40 leaders that were just floating around in the ecosystem that are now actively being developed. If even 20% of those people turn, that's 8 leaders that builds expansive potential into what they do. Because every time, our attitude is, every time we raise a leader, not appoint, anyone can appoint a leader, right?
Yeah.
That doesn't mean anything. Every time we raise a leader, we multiply impact.
Yeah.
And think about your life. You multiply impact. I had the good fortune of being heavily invested into as a young leader. And of course, the man who developed a handful of us, the impact of his life would have seemed small, but the impact of those he raised is massive and literally reaches across the nation and into New Zealand, and I'm not sure where else. So
I was going to ask, right, you use the word pipeline. So this is what I think you're saying. So we've got leaders, so me at GJ's 5 years in, you grab me and you go, Dan, mate, you haven't even started the work of leadership. This is what it looks like. But then the pipeline that you're talking about is, hey, and who's behind you? Who are you actually leading to be a leader? Is that the thought?
Yeah, it's at one level. It's more complex than that, So we developed what we would call the 8 levels of leadership in the Sphere Suite, right from the ground. Like this is literally, we would call it launchpad leadership. And at the base level, it's like, we're not even sure you're a leader. We're not sure that you're sure you're a leader, but we're going to put you on a leadership pathway to discover, can we see leadership in you? And do you see leadership in you? And it's just some, base level leadership stuff. So, like off the top of my head, like launchpad, and then we would say like a catalyst leader, someone who can lead something that grows. And then it goes up all the way up to, movement leaders and influence multipliers who are literally influencing, like you are now. You used to lead in a business, in an industry, and now you're influencing industries. And that's that person up towards the top there. And so we've built out pipelines for all of that. But more than that, what we've now built is that's still limited because it ties you to us. So often what we do is we connect you to us. We put you and some of your team through our leadership pipelines. But while we're doing that, at some point we click into building your leadership pipeline for your environment. Because if we can do that, that has viral potential. Right? It's because now we're catalyzing way more leaders, developing way more leaders. There's a leadership crisis globally in the Western world. It's not just where I work, right? And so if we can create viral leadership capacity, we would say you want to create it wide, and there's a way to do that, and you want to create it deep, and they're 2 very different things, and you want to build both in. So
it's a good thought. All right, mate, let's define what leadership looks like. What is a leader?
Well, I mean, I know you have worked hard on the definition. I would say someone who, the classic definitions are around influences people, but I would say someone who influences people and can take you somewhere. I don't think it's just influence, although if you go somewhere, you've influenced. So I do think it's like influence people, take them somewhere. That's the simplest, crudest way you could put it together for me.
Yeah, that's really, really good. And I feel like it's important because, again, getting back to the array of people that we rub shoulders with in any given workday. You're going to have some people that are like, they don't need to be told to lead. They're just like, in fact, you might need to tell them to, chill out for a bit. And you get those, those people that are happy, not like they're happy to sit on the fence, not want to kind of be leaders. No, happy not to lead, like don't want to lead. And it can seem like that there's a deficiency in people's, at that juncture, it's like, you know what, I don't want to lead, never wanted to lead, or that's not what we're talking about, is it? We're talking about understanding our potential and understanding that within us all, this is the big thing I missed, is I actually needed leadership myself. I needed leadership. Not only did I need to be one, I needed one. And when we understand leadership at that level, we don't mind where people are at. We're not making them do anything they don't want to do.
Yeah.
We're tapping them on the shoulder and say, hey, look, wherever you are, wherever you're going, is this as good as it gets?
Yeah.
So leadership for us, when we've talked about is, and I think this is a Maxwell quote, he said, leadership is influence.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we will just add a little bit onto that.
Yeah.
It's influencing people and outcomes towards desired results.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah.
Now, the reason we would say that is because I needed my receptionist at 18 years old to be a leader, because I needed her to influence outcomes and results.
Yeah.
And so when we think about it through that dynamic, leadership is massive it's a big thing about influence, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's
massive.
How do we as a team win on game day unless we're all influencing outcomes?
Yeah.
So leadership's not an option. Doesn't matter about your personality. It's leading outcomes.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a great definition. I knew you'd have one. Yeah.
So your program then, how do you influence people to influence outcomes?
Yeah, so here's what we do. So we tracked it for 2 years. So 93% of the, I'll give you three numbers, right? 93, 4, and 100. So we tracked every assessment, workshop, coaching, relationship over a 2-year period.
Oh, wow.
93% of the leaders, and I only work with leaders, 93% of the leaders that we did all of that with said their number one challenge and the thing that would move the needle most for them was raising more leaders or better leaders, like raising leaders. And so here's the thing, once we start working with them, what we would do is, or what we do is we go, hey, send us your diary, your calendar for the last 4 weeks.
Yeah, good.
And so 4% of those same leaders, right, had a diary or a calendar that reflected that priority. 4%.
Yeah.
They're saying this is crisis level, we can't grow beyond here, we're stuck, we're hard time just being here, whatever place they're up to. And 4% of them have got their diary reflecting that priority. And then 100% for 2 years, 100% while we tracked it, 2 years, 100% of the leaders who used our baseline just for raising new leaders, we've got this thing called a 4D process, 100% of those leaders raised more leaders in the first 12 months.
Unbelievable.
Right? Yeah. 100%. There was no fail rate.
You gave them a tool.
And we gave them a tool, we helped them project the leaders, we get them to fill in what are the 1 to 4 key roles that are going to be game changing for you. We help them, we teach them how to do a discover list, what to look for, how to do that, how to do pre-deployment development, how to deploy learning, you hinted learning, doing mastering, and how to grow them as they're going on the journey. We call it disciple, how to disciple them. And then every month you just ask 2 questions when you're coaching them. Who's on your list and where's it in your diary?
Yeah.
We teach them to use 15-minute windows, all these things and that's just the base level, like right at the bottom.
Yeah.
But it on its own will move the needle. So in terms of that's how we do it. But the key is you've got to build, what I realized was in terms of bringing leaders through, leaders developing leaders, is that I realized that I was really good at developing. And I'll use a church term here, but I wasn't good at discipling. And this, whether you're a churchgoer or not, doesn't matter. I'll change the language. This is like development, which is like a pathway, a pipeline, and this is apprentice. And if you lead a trade business, you understand you can send a kid to TAFE, but he's not going to come out ready to be a carpenter.
No.
He's got to be apprenticed. And so I realised that what I was really good at was development, leadership pipelines.
Yeah.
But my failure was apprentice. Like it takes more effort. And so most leaders are, if they're a leader, they're good at one or the other. And what you need is both.
Yeah.
You need both going on in different places at different levels, so that there's a development of mass and development of skill, but then the apprentice of like that fine art of being a skilled tradesman, whatever it is.
Yeah. Yeah, it's good. So you've got the concept, the process, and then you've got the person.
Yeah, that's great. That's a great way to put it. And if I could say on pipelines, here's what I would add is, this is the other thing we noticed was how few people who were spending their lives raising leaders had defined the leader they were trying to raise. Like again, less than 5% of leaders had defined the leader they're trying to raise. So I would say, like, one of the leaders, for example, we have a pipeline for is what we would call an expansion-ready leader.
Okay.
Right? And we say that person needs to be able to grow people, build capacity, and lead expansion. That's the definition. And that condensed, it's just an essence statement. But then everything we put into that pipeline needs to fuel that outcome.
Yeah.
So if someone's got some random thought over here and they're like, oh, we need to develop this in them, if it doesn't achieve that specific outcome,
yes,
we're not putting it in there. It's like, what are the absolute essentials for us to deliver that outcome? And then build the pipeline out, you build the sessions, you build the coaching, you build the playbook, you build the tools.
Yeah.
And they can multiply, because if I can go back, there's a long answer, right? If I can go back, you said about, gifted and able. So I mentioned to you visioneering before. The gifted will get it done, but the able will not necessarily. They just haven't been taught yet. So as it relates to a pipeline, we want to build it for the able.
Yes.
So you might be great at it, but what about the team you then go and coach? That's why in the sessions we want the playbook and the tool, so that you can just scale the process. And that's where the multiplication, that's where the viral potential is.
Mate, that is so important what you've just said there. Yeah. Yeah. You're giving people a tool, and I love what you've talked about, mate. It is so important. So what you're beginning with the end in mind with the leader.
Yes.
You're saying, okay, well, hey, if we're doing these things, you are leading. Even if you're doing it poorly, it's like, are we
just start?
Are we on the journey?
Yeah.
Because that's the big thing too, Daz. Hey, and this is one of the big things I'd say, especially in our day, where, mate, you wake up every morning, you feel like a failure. All you got to do is turn on social media and have a look. Oh, mate's drinking 10 litres of water. I only drink. I only have a can of Coke at lunch.
Yeah.
Oh, mate's getting up at 4 o'clock and going to the gym.
Yeah.
What is it now? 10 o'clock, and I'm only just opening my eyes. Yeah. So we see all these high performers and this, this society that's just about, and it's not bad. It's not bad. It's just, what would you call it? A level of attainment that when we look out, we feel like we're never measuring up. And so what we're doing with our leadership group, by the sounds of it, is we're going, all right, let's just take all that off the table. This is what we need to achieve.
Yeah.
Let's not underachieve, absolutely, but let's not feel like failures.
Yeah. It's funny, Dan, you say that. Yesterday, so the person who runs our digital stuff texted me and said, hey, could you just put together on your phone like a 30 to 45 second, just, it's that time of the year, the weather's turning colder, just a little encouragement, like no skill, no tool, just encouragement. And so I did, and I actually spoke to that. I went, hey, I just want to remind you that you're probably doing way better than you think.
That's a good thought.
Right? And the reason is everybody's looking at social media, and you're getting the best version of everybody. The classic line is, we're getting their highlight reel while we see our own behind the scenes. And it's pretty true. And I would say there's some leaders like you're not doing, there's those few leaders like, hey, you're not doing as well as you think.
Yeah.
You need to do some development. But most leaders are having a crack, and they're probably doing better than they think, but they just need to keep going on the journey. I know you enough to go, you and I turn up every day still developing our own leadership. I'll get to 75 and I'll still be developing as a leader and just going on that journey, but you're probably doing way better than you think in most cases.
That's so true. But it is true though that you need to give people tools and metrics to be able to gauge that, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because leadership's tough.
Yeah.
One of the things that that leadership does is you're exposed.
Yeah.
When you have your own business, for instance, you go from being somebody that's just sort of working in the background. You perform, you do well, you're part of the team, everything's great, and then you become, whether you're the business owner or the point leader, whatever it might be. And now every decision you make, every time you turn up, every time you deal with a situation the wrong way, every time you don't deal with a situation that needed dealing with, every wrong employment, every customer care report that comes back negative, it's like you're exposed.
Yeah.
And so it starts to demand of you something that, that might not be in you. And so to be able to give people a tool to be able to work through that, it's just gold. So Daz, let me ask you this. We talk about it like this, skill set, mindset and character, hand, head and heart. if you had to give 3 character-based attributes that a leader needs to have. So in other words, whatever you were before you stepped in this role of leadership, now this is what this position is going to demand of you.
Yeah.
No matter your nature, you can be the most awesome bloke in the world, but as a leader, your character is going to need these 3 things.
Yeah.
What are they?
Yeah, it's a great question. And you know, people say, oh, they changed when they got elevated, or they changed when they got money, or they changed. And I heard it said somewhere sometime, it didn't change them, it just amplified who they were.
Wow.
And that is 100% what I would observe. So whoever we are when we step into leadership, without development and improvement, that is what's going to amplify. So character, for me, character is number 1. Because I can train the rest, but I can't insist on character. So the big 3 for me, and this is personally as well, integrity is number 1. You know, I was on a conversation yesterday. We had to make a decision, an internal one, as you know, the business continues to grow. We had to make this purchase, and the accounts advice was, hey, that would be grey. And I went, tell me about grey. And they said, oh, well, grey it's perfectly legal, but it starts to get into the grey zone. I said, oh, well, we don't do grey.
Good.
So tell me what I need to do to not be in the grey, right? Now, it is never going to come up. But the principle for us is we don't deal in the grey. We'll find another way. Like, there's always another way, right? So, and it wasn't even big. But I'm like, yeah, no, we don't do that. And because if you start to slip around the edges of the grey, you go grey on an invoice, or you go grey on a charge, or you go grey on, you know what I mean? And so the first one is just integrity. I don't think I can overstate that. That's the big one for me. One of the ones I learnt when I was young was, let your yes be yes and your no be no, and I wasn't good at it. And if it changes, own it. And I think in terms of character, your yes is yes. Like eyeball people, you know, I would say man up as a leader. You've got to have the hard conversations. You've got to go where you've got to go. And so your yes is yes, your no is no, and if it changes, own it. And I think one of the big things in character that either makes you or it might not even break you, but it'll leave a ceiling on you, is if you don't own your stuff, you're dead. Because if you're looking out the window as your first response to whose fault is this, you've got to start with you. I loved what you did back. I wanted to drill down. It's not my podcast. You know, it's like you said you just looked at you 5 years in, and I wanted to stop there and go, oh, can we talk about that?
Yeah, right.
Because everything's going to rise and fall on that. Grow you, the leader, first. So just, you know, that side of it in terms of character. And then I think I want to have purity at the core and on the fringes. And what I mean, I see a lot of good people, a lot of good leaders who I would say have absolute purity of heart at the core, but they allow themselves things on the fringes, and the things on the fringes they'll be the things that eat you up.
Okay, explain that.
So what I mean is, you might go, I might never do the wrong thing by you in business. You know, now let me use a better example. Can I think of one? I might never do the wrong thing by you in business. I might speak well of you, etc. But out here on the fringe, if I'm in a conversation with some other business person, I might speak ill of you to my own advantage.
Yeah.
And I would say that, yeah, strong at the core, like I like Dan, I'm for Dan, but out in the fringe, I'll adjust that to my advantage, even to your detriment. And I would say they're fringe behaviours because people tell themselves, oh, Dan will never know, this is not going to hurt.
Yeah.
But even if it doesn't hurt Dan ever, it does hurt who you are.
It does.
And that has a trust limit on it, right? So I think things like that so many times, strong at the core. And so I'm always looking, what am I allowing on the fringes? What do I allow? Right down to, you know, what I watch, how I travel. You know, actually, I sent it to you years ago. I have a guide on how I travel. I travel maybe 40% of the year. I have a guide how I do that. I want to make sure the fringes are good.
40%.
I love.
I'd say it's have to be 60.
It might be higher, but you know, I want to be happily. If I win the world and lose my wife,
oh, bro.
You know, and if I lose my wife, and no, not against. I got family members who've had things break down, but for me, I'm like, I don't want to do that if I can help it, and I think I can help it, and so yeah. Does that make sense?
Mate, look, it makes perfect sense. And it's funny because getting back to positional leadership and the heart of leadership, how many people have a position of leadership and yet their character has failed them, and that's what they're remembered for.
Yeah.
And it's not
great people.
Yeah, mate. And you know what? It's not a judgment on them.
No.
Like I'm not saying people don't judge them. I'm saying we're not trying to judge them. It's just, hey, if we're talking to 1 million leaders, let's just get this stuff right, just for your protection.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I love what you've just brought, those 3 things around character. All right, Daz, mindset. Remember, hand, head, and heart. Skill set, mindset, and character.
Yeah.
You step into a leadership position. This position's going to demand of you these certain character attributes. You've just told us what you think they are. Mindset.
Yeah.
Give me 3 attributes of mindset that you're going to need to get right if you're in a position of leadership.
Yeah. The first one that's clear to me in terms of mindset is I would call it faith-filled optimism, right?
Yeah.
And because if you're the leader and you're leading into a not yet accomplished future or something that isn't yet but will be, one of the things that you have to do is, I believe, you've got to live with faith-filled optimism. And it's just like, I got faith for where we're headed. I'm optimistic about it, and I'm full of that.
Yeah.
And why all 3 words? Because life has a way of naturally eroding that, right? Like just the grind of life and today's era. And so I think you want to have, in terms of mindset, faith-filled optimism. And that's why I write it down. I have the 1-page doc. This is where we're headed. This is why we're headed there. This is what we're changing. This is how we get there. And even then, I still need, other people. I feel like in my life, I need God to turn up, and I'm going on that journey. But I need faith-filled optimism. And the reason I need it as a leader is that at times nobody else is going to have it.
Yeah, mate.
Right? And so there's this ancient story, a guy called Nehemiah, and he basically rebuilds a wall of a city. And he goes in, he's moved by it, he has a holy discontent. This is where I learnt it. And he comes up with his mission, we're going to rebuild the wall. And he says, so the people that will not be destitute. And it's like a terrible vision statement, but it is one. It's a picture of the future, creating passion. And he's done all the assessment work. He's ready to go. He's like, yeah, this is going to happen. He rallies the people and they're like, yeah, we're in.
Yeah. And
not everybody's in, and that's always good to remember. Like, you're going to have people on your staff, on your team, I would call, there's all in, lean out, and all out people in every environment, right?
Yeah.
But there's these lean in and all in people. And they say, yeah, we're in, let's rebuild it. So they're 26 days into the journey. They've rebuilt the wall to half its height. They've done in 26 days what nobody had done for 100 years.
Yeah.
They're about to change people's lives and their future. And they start listening to outside voices. They start looking at the rubble. They're like, there's too much rubble. There was less rubble than when they started because they've built the wall with the rubble. And now they're saying there's too much rubble. They're listening to people who aren't even making anything happen. Wow. I'm like, why are you listening to them? And Nehemiah gives this masterclass. He turns up and he says, listen, stop listening to this. Stop listening to internal weariness. Remember who brought you here. Remember why you're here. Fight for your family and your children, and let's get on with it. Wow. And I say all of that. I forget the question now. I got on a roll there. But faith-filled optimism. That's a long answer.
No,
but before the people quit, they were ready to go. And Nehemiah turns up and realizes, this is a leadership moment. He identifies it. Lots of people would have taken the heat off. Let's reduce your role. Let's take some jobs off you. Nehemiah says, no, that's not the moment. I'm going to reset you, renew you, and rally you.
So good.
And he provides leadership. But the reason he can provide it is because internally, he's already there. So I do this process. Every Sunday, I drive into a town and speak, right, at a church. And I'm in a different place every weekend across our own churches and then others. And I have the same process. I listen to these 2 songs. I listen to this song from the darkest period of my life where I had no power, where I was kind of at the mercy. I felt like, and my life was the hardest season I ever lived through. I listened to this song that kind of takes you there. You got a song from when you were a kid, like it takes you there. This takes me there. I listen to that and it reminds me that I'm not that clever. It reminds me that on my best day, I need God. And then I listen to this song that speaks to the future. And I tell you, when I play it as I hit the 60 zone, because I know most of the towns I'm going to, and when that song comes on, I just remind myself that today we move the needle. That today I'm going to speak into somebody's life that's going to bring change. Today we help this, local group of people move forward, and that somewhere in the future, this will be a transformative place in a local community. I do that same process every single Sunday. Why? I want to leave with faith, but I need to be filled with that faith-filled optimism. I do that every day in a different way.
Let's go.
I'm turning up full, and now I can lead you anywhere, no matter what's going on. That'll change your life as a leader. That's the first one. The second one I would say is in terms of, what are we talking here? Mentality?
Yeah.
Mindset. So mindset. In terms of mindset, it's not about you. It's about, in my life, it's about God, cause, and people. But if your leadership is about you, it's going to be fine when everything's good, but it's going to fall apart when everything's not, because at that point, people are thinking of themselves. It's not about you. If my business is just about me and making money, if what I lead is about me and being in charge, that has a use by date, and it's called the season of struggle, right? The cracks will turn, And so just build that paradigm. I would say it's a paradigm of, it's not about me, it's about God.
That's good.
It's about cause, it's about people. And so that's the second mindset. And I'm not sure what I'd put third, but one thing I live again and again is every season has a potential, or has a current ceiling and a potential platform. So in every season of life, I'm doing it right now, I'm thinking about what's the current ceiling on, like, the Jethro project, on me as a leader, on who I lead. What's the current ceiling? Where could we grow to based on what we've got in the mix? And how do I turn that ceiling into a platform the expansive future can build on? And I'm thinking through those three things. I'm just thinking through me as a leader, those I lead, like the leaders, and what I lead. And I just do that again and again. Go, what's the current ceiling? Because every season has one. It's not bad. Just find it. How can we make it a platform the future can build on? Me, the leader, those I lead, what I lead.
It's absolute gold, Daz. Because these are the tools of leadership that even natural leaders will need to adopt. So
they're all developed. They're not natural. Yeah.
And that's the thing. It's like, the question is, a leader born or made? Let's just wipe that out of human vocabulary because they're developed. And if they're, like you just mentioned before, I can't remember exact words you used, but if they are natural, they're going to need to adopt those kinds of things that you've just mentioned. What you have just said is absolute gold. It's so skill set, mindset, and character. They say about success, and they've done plenty of studies on this, of course. They reckon up to 80% of successful people, people that have been able to take something from here to there, 80% of it comes back down to their mindset.
Yeah, right.
The way that they think about it.
I'm not surprised.
So resilience, for instance, being able to deal with negativity. Because when you step in that role of leadership, you're on the coalface. You are going to have to deal with negativity. I love the thought of faith-filled optimism, mate. Yeah. I tell you what, too, just quietly, because it's just you and me, I need that. I need that in this season, that faith-filled optimism where it's like, okay, whatever it is, but what I want it to be. And what have I got to do to get there? Because life will not roll out the red carpet.
Life will not roll out the red carpet, but you can get there. It's funny, Dan, right? Because I walk in, we're in your offices today, and on the other side of this studio is an amazing office. Like, you just walk in, the actual environment is inspiring, and just in an off the record conversation, not with you, I was listening to the next phase of what you're building out, and my response was, oh my gosh, this could be anything. So it's interesting sitting in the inside of it, right? And in the grind of it, and as an outsider coming in and hearing what you're all about, who you're helping, how that builds out, and not from you, to hear that, I was like, oh yeah, I need their services. And then I could think of like 100 people in a heartbeat that need it. And I'm like, I would write it down, obviously, if you haven't, but as an outsider, it's obvious. And but you're in the grind of it. So that's why you need those things that you're filling yourself with, I think.
I think you're right, mate. And so we developed a program that helps people like me who don't naturally get it. to be able to get it.
Yeah.
To be able to take, our teams and be able to rally, to be able to get up for game day every day, to be able to gain consistency. Everything that we want out of our businesses is a byproduct. So we would say it's a byproduct of leadership, team, and culture.
Yeah.
And then there's some drivers outside of those three things. But being able to give people tools and the language and the metrics to be able to go, okay, well, this is what leadership looks like. Okay, all right. This is what I expect of my team. This is what I need of my team. And this is what a good culture looks like. One of the obstacles we have in our business, Daz, is that people say, oh, I've got a great culture. And it's not for us to say they do or they don't. But they say, oh, yeah, we all get on and we have a barbie every Friday. And it's like, that's good. But what constitutes a good culture, And if it's a couple of good people, what happens when they leave?
Yeah, that's a great thought.
And so it's like being able to have the tools, which we're talking about today, to be able to go, okay, let's define leadership. Let's define team. Where do we need to go? You said it before. If we're going to talk about leadership, what do we need from our leaders?
Yeah.
Being able to start with the end in mind. And then around culture, before we go and say we've got a great one or a bad one, what are we defining as culture?
Yeah.
What does a good culture look like? What do they achieve? And so when I look at where we are in our season, to use a biblical reference or a word, we use the word faith.
Yeah.
Faith-filled optimism.
Yeah.
It's funny because the Bible explains faith like this. It says that faith is the essence of things hoped for, but not yet seen.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah. Yeah.
And I just want to say to anybody who's out there listening, that is what leadership is.
Yeah.
It's living a life of things you're hoping for, but you can't see it yet.
Yeah, not yet. Yeah.
And it's not a matter of if you're going to be, what's the word? Feel lost at times, or if you're going to be disheartened. It's just a matter of when.
Yeah.
And if you can't find faith-filled optimism and give yourself some tools to be able to get yourself up, you are going to struggle as a leader.
Yeah, it's good. If you can create that internal process, that framework that helps you go there, it's game-changing because I work the framework. They hey, can I ask you a question?
Go for it.
Because your previous business, obviously I went there and worked with your team a couple of times, and I would say I'm culture obsessed in my life. Truly one of the greatest cultures I've ever seen was the business you guys built. The culture of team and the delivery consistent with culture of everything. How did you shift that? How did you build that over, the years?
Yeah, it's a good question, mate. So it's essentially what our handed out program is now.
Right.
So we started with us, the leader, and so I had to look in the mirror. What I realised that I didn't have a why, so I didn't have the ability to get myself up in the face of adversity. And so we structured a really strong mission. That was the first thing. And our mission became experience quality. Now, one of the things I struggled with, Daz, and I feel like every business will struggle with this, is that I had to be able to ask myself, why us? If someone's going to build a home, because we had some great builders in our area, why us? Why would they come to us? And we weren't the cheapest, so it wasn't that. And because we weren't the cheapest, if that's the only metric I use, would I sell my mum a home?
Yeah.
Because if cheapness
question.
is the metric, well, wouldn't I, with a clear conscience, send her down the road where it's a bit cheaper? Unless I can, and this really haunted me, unless I can define why I exist as an organisation, what separates us from the rest of the pack, what separates us apart, not better necessarily, although, you obviously hope to be, outstripping your competition. I had to be able to find it and I couldn't. And so our mission became experience quality.
Yeah.
We said that a quality home is what everyone should experience. They will experience quality throughout the whole process when they come to us. And it gave us a backbone, mate, from the very moment we spoke to them to the very moment that we hand the keys over and beyond, we created a business around experience quality.
Yeah.
And that became our mission.
Yeah.
You know, we weren't builders of homes. We were people that ensured that everybody that came into contact with us experienced quality.
And that culture's then lived out every aspect of the journey.
It touched every aspect of every part of our business. And so this is the power of mission.
I love the simplicity of that, by the way.
Yeah. Well, and it's like, mate, it's a really cool story around, I'm not going to be able to get the quote exactly right, but back in the 60s when America decided that they were going to try to send somebody to the moon, they were coming, a very distant second to the Soviet Union, and America at the time that President Kennedy announced that they were going to send a person to the moon, they hadn't even been into outer space.
Yeah, right.
And they were losing the space race to the Soviet Union. And President Kennedy said something really interesting. He said, "We've got the resources, we've got the people. What we haven't done is we haven't set the goals. We haven't stipulated the time frame. We haven't rallied the resource."
Right.
And he said,
"That's good.
Once we've done that, then we set the mission,
Yeah.
and we will send a person to the moon." And mate, when I read that, I thought, you know what? That's what was lacking.
Yeah, that's good.
I might have had the people.
Yeah.
I might have had the resource.
Yeah.
I might have had the potential, but I hadn't set the long range goal.
Yeah.
I hadn't set a time frame on it, and I hadn't given my team a backbone yet. Mission, bro, is so important.
Brilliant. That's brilliant. I can see how the whole thing flowed out of that, having experienced your business.
Yeah.
Coming into it. So, yeah, that's genius.
And then it was just like what we talked about, leadership, and set the expectation across every area of the business. It's empowering the outcome. We did, lots of training and development.
Yeah.
And measure the results. We didn't want to find out the hard way. So our touch point report was very conclusive. It was like, all right, what do we need to know daily, weekly, and monthly, and then hold people accountable. It's like, which is a lot easier, mate, when you're setting the expectations up front.
Yeah, yeah, brilliant.
It's not as hard. But, mate, we haven't finished with you. So, hand, head, heart. You've gave us 3 for character. You've given us 3 for mindset.
Yep.
Absolute gold, mind you. Give us our skill set. You're a leader. You've been leading at a certain level. You've just been, part of the team. You've stepped into a position of leadership, and now it's going to demand of you things that you aren't even ready for.
Yeah.
What are they in regards to skill set?
Well, at every level, the skills are different, right? But what I try to do is simplify it. So if you're listening to this, just go, okay, well, what are the 1 or 2 things I've got to get right that move the needle?
So good.
Like, don't be overwhelmed with I'm inadequate to lead at this level. Often you can, and this is why it's called the Jethro Project, right? There's this ancient story, Jethro and Moses. And Moses is this elite leader by this time. I'm answering the question. And Jethro turns up. Moses thinks Jethro's going to be super impressed. And what happens is they celebrate what we call the so far story of all that's gone on. And the next day, Jethro turns up. He's watching Moses at work. He's like, I call him the original capacity consultant. and he's there, and he pulls Moses up after a few hours and says, "Hey, what you're doing, it's not good."
Yeah.
And what he does, he says to Jethro, Jethro says to Moses, "What you're doing is not good. You're going to burn out. The people are going to be frustrated. The expensive, future is on hold." He says, "But if you listen to me, you're going to be able to stand the strain as a leader," which is important. He doesn't say you're going to be strain free. He says you're going to stand the strain, because leaders live with strain.
Good.
He says the people go home satisfied, and the expensive future will build, essentially. And and then he says to Moses, "Hey, here are the 3 things you need to do. You need to grow as a leader, you need to develop leaders, and you need to build a leadership pipeline." Now, the 3 things change. The point is, when it comes to skill development for you to lead at the level you're at or the next level, it's not usually 10 or 15 things.
Yeah.
It's 1, 2, or 3 things. Moses just needed to make 3 changes, and those 3 changes were all connected. Yeah. And so in terms of skill, I would say this. The first one I would look to develop in terms of, we're talking about leader, right? Not manager.
That's right.
Leader is the skill of a visionary. And we've touched on that a couple of times in this podcast. So how to craft, cast, and catalyse vision, galvanise buy-in, and then lead the vision seasons. And lead the vision seasons are, there's rise and build as a general rule. There's the early adoption, there's enthusiasm, you're in startup mode, ... We're all going well. And then you hit a few clunks and it's a bit harder. And then you hit what I would call in the grind. It's not linear, this process, but it often runs like this, in the grind. And we're just turning up, working hard. And that's most of life.
Yeah.
And then there's what I would call in the gap. And in the gap is really hard because this is where, like we talked about before, this is where the leader needs to turn up seeing what nobody else can see because their eyes are down. And so you want to learn a visioneer is able to do the front end, able to lead the vision seasons until this comes to pass. And my experience around vision, my personal experience is about every 7 years, roughly, that gets realized. So you're doing a lot of leadership in the grind, in the gap, resetting, renewing, rallying, casting, crafting, catalog. You're doing a lot of that for a long time. So that's the first one. And anyone can learn to grow as a visioneer.
Yeah.
I would say that's number one. And so the second thing I would say is strategy and execution. Again, some people are skilled strategists. Some people are just able. It's not about being able to build out the whole entire strategic plan. Bring great people into the room. I would say that the thing for me is I've got a very limited skill set. I've always been hugely dependent on people. But the things I can do, great. But if I can't do them, because it's not about me, I'm going to bring the best people into the room. And so strategy and execution. Strategy is just what I said before. It's we are here, we're trying to go there. How do we get there? How do we get from here to there? That's all strategy is.
Yeah.
So usually it's like, what are the 3 or 4 things that move the needle that are going to be like the pillars that we do it with? You articulated before your process from, essentially from the sales point right through to hand over the keys and their experience even beyond it. There are key things along there that move the needle of that. And so what are the 3 or 4 things? And then get a team in the room if you're not a natural strategist and go, hey, let's break this down. We've got this simple 1-page planner that makes it the simplest process ever. Don't make complex what you need simple if that's how you wire. And so that'll help people a lot. Execution is the key piece for me. This is where everyone just about falls down. Execution is just, did it get to my diary? And did I action that, right? It's like, it's actioning strategy. That's all it is. And so in terms of that, my process is to go, what are the big rocks? So those strategy pillars are all in my diary. Culture build out is in my diary. My own leadership development is in my diary.
Yes.
Right?
So important.
Right? All these things are in my diary. And so I just had this last week, Dan, where I really failed, or I felt like I failed to deliver on this communication piece that I had to do. And I have to do it regularly. And so what I did was I went and looked and went, okay, this needs more allocation in my week, but my diary is loaded. I work 6 days. So I'm like, where's the first gap? Well, I've got a critical piece moving probably, really late in the year. And so I went to the first date where my diary changes late in the year and I inserted it there now. Now I need to find a way to get it done in the gaps here. But what I know is come that date, it is a fixed piece of my diary moving forward. And that becomes a priority, right? I hope that makes sense. And all I've got to do is, and if you're like me, I have multiple alarms going off all day, every day, to make sure I execute.
Hey, mate, I want to bring up a point here because it's an amazing thing you're talking about. So we talked earlier about leadership, right? So you're a natural leader. I'm not a natural leader, but I had to learn because I stepped into a position of leadership and it started demanding of me.
Yeah.
And then it's like, all right, well, I bail or I do what it takes to lead.
Yeah.
And so I've had to be really deliberate around that. And so out of that, we birthed a process. Now, one of the interesting things that's just come out of what you just said then is, this is what I know about you. As much as you might be an amazing leader and you are a natural leader, you are not so amazing at being able to organise your time.
I knew where you were headed.
But this is the cool thing, though. Now it's it's a skill set deficiency, if you will, or it at least doesn't come natural to you.
No, it is a
so you've set in a tool and a process to be able to manage that area of weakness.
Yes.
That's essentially what we're talking about here. Right? Yeah. As leaders, we can't think about ourselves as passing or failing. We have this measure, and it's called functional and extreme. Never pass and fail. Right. You're either functional in an area or you're extreme. You know, so you can be hopeless. You know what I mean, and need improving, but you're not failing until you quit.
Yeah.
And so, mate, anybody that knows Darren Bonnell knows that he needs a good structure.
100%, and about 3 people to keep it organised. You know, like. But it's true, and I'm glad you bring it up. As soon as you started talking, I thought, I bet I know where we're headed. But that's the point, right?
It is.
I'm never going to be elite at that. But the reality is that.
Well, if you put the tools in place like you have, I'd say you are.
Yeah, so honest. Like when
it just doesn't come natural.
Yes, and if you look, if we pulled my diary up right now, you look at what goes on across a week. A lot of people go like, okay, how do you get that done? Like you heard at the start where I'm working. So. But yeah, you just keep moving the needle. One of our cultural values is, a commitment to better in everything. And why are we saying that? Because you don't start out excellent at everything.
You never do.
But if we keep moving the needle, eventually, you win. So yeah. Anyway.
No, that's good. Sorry, bro, cut you off, mate. So you got to visioneering. What was the second one?
Strategy and execution.
What's your third one?
Yeah, and this might be the first one. If you were prioritizing.
Yeah, good.
And that's people skill. And stay with me if you're thinking, oh yeah, Darren, I get it. No, people skill is vital. We're not naturally skilled at people as for most of us, right? So I would say something like, like I was coaching someone a bunch of years ago, and it wasn't going the way I thought it should. Been incredible growth, but we'd now hit a ceiling. And I was like, why aren't we breaking through this next ceiling? And someone who knew us mutually said to me, hey, Daz, you're coaching that person. They're not wired like you. Now, that seems really obvious sitting here. Yeah. But back then, it wasn't as obvious to me. I just thought I could develop everybody. And that was the moment where I learned, I've got to develop you according to you. So everyone's probably listening to podcasts going, that's obvious, but it wasn't obvious to me. And so what we're saying is I need to develop my skill of understanding how people are wired, what's the range, and then I use tools that, other people's tools to help me get my head around that. And so I want to develop the people skill. But here's another one. We teach all of our coaches in the first session they do with partners. We teach them, the goal is this simple. You need 2 pages of notes.
Yeah.
If they didn't make much progress, I'm not worried. We'll get the playbook done in the next session. But 2 pages of notes tells me they listened and they asked questions. Wow. People want to be known. They want to be heard. They want to be understood. They don't want us to answer their problems our way. They want us to understand where they're at and how we help them move forward their way. So understanding like the importance of listening. Podcasts are weird, right? Because you don't get to go backwards and forwards. If we were able to, I would have asked way more questions on you about culture and your 4-step process and all of that. But the context is different. But you want to be able to develop the skill of listening. I have this thing. It used to be in my calendar every week. So I'd read it every day because I can see the whole week. And it used to be this, what do I know about the person that I didn't before this conversation? And if I can't tell you something new that I know about you, I talk too much.
Wow.
And so I wanted to, that's a really basic level skill, right? And so how do you, just little things, how do you do that? How do you know if this is a pastoral moment, leadership moment? How, I've talked about listening skills, all of those things, but people skills. And, building what will we call it, authenticity into that. Like, don't just work the process.
Yep.
I want to really be listening. I want to know who you are. And if that's not naturally where I'm coming to a conversation, develop that. The last thing I'd say on people skill, if I can give people something, here's a little process I use in uncovering leaders. And when we're having the leadership, we call it a discover conversation. I come to the conversation and I teach guys to do this. Tell them what you notice about them. The reason I get them to do that is if they can't tell me what they notice about them, they haven't got a relationship. They're going to leverage this situation for leadership. Yep. I want them to, what do you notice about them? What do you see in them? What do they see in themselves? What might God want them to do with that? Here's what I'm thinking. Wow. Those 5 things, you can have a conversation. You're going to put into people, you're going to hear from people, and you're going to help them dream. They're the 3 skills I'd focus on first.
Well, mate, when you land it like that, it's no wonder that leadership's so important, hey? Because we don't see what's in us, and maybe that's the best way to finish. It's like we, even as leaders, don't see what's in us. We don't often see our potential, but other people can at times. You know, when we're the best, we're not always at our best with each other, but when we are the best with each other, you think about what it is to be a spouse or what it is to be a father. You look into your close family or your children, you go, mate, I see this in you. No matter what you're going through, whatever negativity there might be during the day or whatever mistakes you've made, this is how I see you. This is what I think you can become. And that's an investment into a person, isn't it, mate?
Yeah,
because
totally.
often we can't see it. So it's a great way to land it, mate, because I think that's what leadership is. It's trying to draw the best out of each other.
Yeah. Could I make a final statement? And if you listen to the podcast, Dan hasn't asked me to do this. You know, when we needed outside eyes to look over what we were doing, we came to you, right? And went, hey, can you guys look over this for us? Like, we're just a bit stuck on the way forward. And I do it for a living. It was weird for me. I was bringing someone in to do what I do, but I needed outside eyes. And I would say this to you, like when I was thinking about who the best voice to bring into the room is, you were it. Wow. You know, and what you do, like what we've just listened to, you know, my final comment would be, I hope you appreciate what's fully in you, and what's on your life, and what you bring to the table in terms of business growth, health, expansion. And not just that, I listen to you and think, man, so many leaders are going to free up their lives. They're not going to break. And so thanks. And I say that as someone who's brought you in. And so thanks for the conversation. Thanks for the opportunity. And I hope you can see what's in you to the fullness of what it is.
Well, thanks, mate. That's quite a compliment. I really appreciate it. And probably a good place to finish. Thank you, mate. Appreciate your time, my brother. See you, mate.